Welcome to a sequence of 5 videos which I made for my two classes, Math 180 and Math 104. It's about descriptive statistics, and I will show at the example of income distributions, starting with relative frequency tables, how to create a histogram and how to create a cumulative relative frequency table and the ogive. This is the content of the video 1. In part 2, I will focus on the mean of group data. This is a little more complicated, so you have to be careful there. In part 3, we look at the median of group data. This is maybe optional. This is maybe not needed for the other 2 videos. And the other 2 videos focus on my Math 104 class, Mathematics of Inequality. In part 4, we will do Robin Hood index using mean. And in part 5, we will do Lorenz curve and Gini index. So what will be covered in this first video? This is an exercise in descriptive statistics with group data. And starting point is income distribution is just an example for this. And given is a relative frequency table of this group data. Then we will see how to create a histogram in Excel from this relative frequency table. We will see how to calculate a cumulative relative frequency table using the property that the cumulative data, the next value of a cumulative data is a previous value plus the actual value of the relative frequency table. And we will graph this as well. This is the so-called ogive. As far as Excel is concerned, we will look at the following skills. We will look at the AutoSum. Well, we'll do some basic stuff, references, simple formulas maybe. Then we will look into inserting bar charts. We will look at the select data menu point, how to insert x-axis labels. And we will look into how to reformat a bar chart into a histogram in Excel, and also inserting line charts. Okay, what we want to do in this first session is to go from relative frequency table to histogram, to cumulative relative frequency table, and to ogive. So here on this sheet you see the income distribution for female full-time employees from 2020 for Switzerland. It's a so-called relative frequency table with groups, group data. So on the left we see the classes, so the monthly income brackets in a sense. So these are the people who are making 0 to 1,000 francs per month, 1,001 to 2,000 francs per month, and so on. Maybe let me make it a little larger, maybe, then we can see the numbers easier. And on the right, we see the relative frequency. So 0.2% of the female full-time employees in Switzerland make this amount of money between 0 and 1,000, so almost nothing, almost nobody. And then 0.4% get between 1,001 and 2,000, 1.7% between 2,001 and 3,000, and so on. So this is our so-called relative frequency tables, classes on the left in this column here, and relative frequencies on the right. This data was taken from an official Swiss Excel sheet, but adjusted a little because there are some rounding errors in this Excel sheet, and I adjusted it a little because what we want to have is that the sum of all these relative frequencies on the right should add up to 100%. And of course, we can very easily check this. So we go here, we click on this cell, and then we use this so-called AutoSum function in Excel, which you activate by clicking on this sigma here, or you can also use a function equals sum, but this is the easiest way to do it. So you first click on the cell where you want to have the sum to appear, then you click on the sigma, And then usually Excel guesses very accurately what numbers to add. And you see in this case, maybe look it up. Okay, that's exactly what I want. I want the sum of these numbers. So I just click my enter button, and you see the sum of these values is 100%. Again, this is not true for the original data. I adjusted it a little because of these rounding errors. Okay, next what we do is we try to make the histogram, the so-called histogram of this data. Histogram is a kind of bar graph, and so Excel calls it bar graph, but it's a little different. We will talk about the differences, but in principle, the way you create a bar graph in Excel is you highlight the data you want to display, not the 100%, but everything up to here. You could also, well, that's maybe the best way to do this. And then we want to insert a chart. So I click on insert because we want to insert something. And then you see here are the different charts we have. And if I hover over this icons, it shows different names. And here, that's exactly what I want to do, a column or bar chart. So I click on this. And if I click on this, we have a few options. I would recommend to almost always use the very first option. Some of them are really fancy. You can do it horizontally, you can do it vertically, you can do 3D. Looks nice, but let's just go for the basic one, which is this one here. And if I go over this, this chart already shows so what it would be. And of course, you could also check it out. The 3D would look like this, but again, maybe 3D is not very appropriate in this case. Well, or maybe it is. But I click on it, and that's almost already the histogram, except that the x-axis is not labeled correctly, and I eventually want to have a histogram and not a bar chart, and these look a little different, but this can be fixed very easily. All right, let's go first fixing the x-axis issue. And the way you do this is you right-click on this chart in Windows, you right-click, and then you go to select data. So select data means you want to either insert more data, or you want to relabel the x-axis, because of course the x values are also part of the data and they're not in yet. These are the classes. So in a sense, I want to insert something, but I want to insert only the x-axis data. So for this reason, I go to select data, and then this dialog pops up in Excel. And it's important to understand that in Excel, always the left part of this dialog refers to the y values, and the right part refers to the x values. And you see it also here, horizontal axis labels. So these are the x-axis labels, and here we have the y-axis values in a sense. Okay, what I want to do is I want to change the x-axis label. So far they are 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a default. If you don't give any hint what the x-axis might be, then Excel just puts in numbers. But I don't want to have 1, 2, 3. I want to have the class names. So I click on Edit, and then you get this dialog here. And in this field, you either type in the addresses of the axis label ranges, or even simpler, you highlight it with your mouse. So I'm dragging my mouse over all these labels, and you see on in the sheet it says sheet 1 A4 to A24. Keep in mind the colon is a dot dot dot. In a sense, it goes from A4 to A24. The dollar signs don't have to don't worry about the dollar signs yet. And sheet 1 is just the one sheet we have, so this is not much of a miracle. So yes, that's what I want to have. I release it, and if I release it and move this window away, which is still, technically I could still change everything. And then of course I see on this graph that now the x-axis labels are perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to have. So I just take it, I click on OK, and I have to click on OK again, so I have to confirm it twice. So don't forget this, otherwise you might not have the result. And here we go. That's now our histogram. So now, well, maybe at this point I want to label it and say it's a histogram. So I want to give a title. Of course, it's a histogram of the female full-time employees 2020 in Switzerland. Okay, that's good enough. Now what I want to, ideally what I want to do as well is I want to make it look like a histogram. In a histogram, the difference between bar graph and histogram is in a histogram, the columns touch each other. And in a bar graph, they do not. Bar graphs are used for discrete data, and histograms are used for continuous data very often if you have these grouped data. And so what I want to do is I want to reformat these columns. So what I'm doing now is I'm right-clicking on these columns. And now I'm going not to select data because I don't want to insert data or change data or anything. The data is all fine. I just want to show it a little differently. I want to format the data. So I click on Format Data Series. And now the funny part in Excel is that the very first window you get, again, you could format a lot here. Many possibilities. Maybe I want to try it out at some point. But at this point, the very first window you get is exactly what we want to change. We want to change the overlap and we want to change the gap width, a gap between the T's in a sense. So you see we have a gap and we have a negative overlap. The negative overlap, we just put the overlap to 0. We don't want to have any positive or negative overlap. And the gap width, you could put to 100%, you could put to 0 because you don't want to have any gaps. But maybe it's even nicer if you allow a little bit gap because then the different columns are a little apart from each other. So I usually put in 5% as a gap. That's a nice gap. So you see, I put this in, and then I don't have to confirm it. I just click on my sheet, and that's what I get. And that's a perfect histogram, as you can see. We have the columns almost touching each other, but we just have a 5% gap between these columns, which again makes things a little nicer looking. Instead of putting a gap, you could also put in a border around the columns or something like this. This is all possible, but I think the simplest way is to do it this way. So I'm clicking this off here. I don't need the format anymore. So my histogram is done. So that's for the first part, going from relative frequency table to histogram. Next one I want to do is I want to go to the so-called cumulative relative frequency table. Cumulative means that we don't look at classes between a number and another number, but rather all these classes are from 0 to an upper boundary. So the left boundary of these cumulative classes is always 0, but the right boundary could be 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. So in other words, what we're doing here is we are saying, let me label it first. I say it's my cumulative relative frequency table. And here I have my classes. Well, maybe I'll make it a little larger. Not sure why this got so small. You see, you can use your brush, your format brush, are the same as in Word. And here I have my classes again, and I have my cumulative relative frequencies. So I'm abbreviating this a little, maybe a small lower r here. Okay, that's maybe better. So what are the classes? The first class is everything less or equal 1000. You see, this is essentially the same as we have here. 0 to 1000 means less or equal 1000 because nobody gets a negative income. But the next class is now less or equal 2000. So the next class, the next cumulative class would be we combine these two classes, the 0 to 1000 and the 1001 to 2000. Yeah. And then, of course, we go on. We could do this manually, but it's also possible to do it by highlighting these two cells and then grabbing this handle on the bottom and dragging it down. And you see on already the preview here. Let me move it up to here. And you see Excel will be intelligent enough to understand that you want to continue like this, less or equal 3000, less or equal 4000. Now, the last one is not less or equal 21,000. The last one would be all. Because you see, if we put all these classes together, of course, we have all people. All right. What about the cumulative relative frequencies? Well, the first class, as we discussed, is already the first class about the relative frequency. So, of course, this one can be just copied. So I'm putting in an equal sign and saying, okay, I just want to have this 0.2% appear again. You see, this is a reference here. I'm not copying the 0.2%. I'm just referring to this 0.2%. Because if the data will change at some point, then this cumulative relative frequency table should change automatically. So I put this reference in, I click enter, and I get my 0.2%. Next one is a sum of the two values, 0.2% and 0.4%. So what we could do is we could say it's this one, so I'm clicking it in, plus that one. So I want to have 0.2% plus 0.4%. And that's all right. You see, I have my 0.6%. Next one I could do, okay, it's this one plus this one plus this one. And you see, it gets a little tedious now if you proceed, because then you have to take a sum of 3 values, a sum of 4 values, a sum of 5 values, and so on. You know, this gets a little tedious to click in. It's possible. It's not so much of a problem. So I click enter and I get my 2.3%, which is the sum of these 3 values here. Let me show you a simpler way how to do this. I'm erasing this, but keep the 2.3% in mind. I'm erasing it because what we know is that if we expand this cumulative classes, if we go from 2000 to 3000, then we take everybody up to 2000. That means we take this 0.6%, and we add the people who make between 2001 and 3000. So we add this one. So the formula for the cumulative relative frequencies is we go to the previous cumulative relative frequency value and add the most recent relative frequency value. So the previous cumulative one plus the most recent relative without the word cumulative. So in other words, what we are doing here is we are saying is I want the 0.6% plus the 1.7%. And of course, we get 2.3%. It's not much of a miracle. So I click to this one, and I get my 2.3%. And of course, you could say, okay, why is this easier? Well, because what we can now do is we can take this formula and drag it down. So we copy it down. You see, I click on it. I have this small handle on the right. I grab it. I move it down. And Everything now is falling into place automatically. Maybe I just show it here with one example. Maybe the less or equal 7,000. You see, what is it? I double click on it to show the formula. It's B34. What is this? It's my most recent, the number of people in the 6,001 to 7,000 bracket, plus, no, this was a B10, plus a B34, which is a previous one. Let me show. Okay, it doesn't show it, but you see it here. It goes to the 60.1% plus the 14.1%. So everything is all right, and you see, of course, the all is 100%. You also see that these numbers are increasing. That's a must in a cumulative relative frequency table with positive percentages, which we usually have. That these cumulative relative frequency values are increasing. Okay, last thing for this unit is we want to display this, and this is called the ogive. So the graph of this cumulative relative frequency table is called the ogive. So what we do is we do very much like in the previous case. I highlight everything, and I want to insert a chart. So I go to Insert, and I go to the charts. But now I don't want to have a bar graph. Ogive is usually not a bar graph. Ogive is a line graph, and the line graph is this button here. So insert a line or area chart. Well, we want to have a line chart. I click on it again for the options. Choose the first one. Again, first one is best. There's already a preview, which is kind of not totally shown, but looks all right to me. So I click OK. And this is the so-called ogive. So maybe I change the title already. The ogive, meaning it displays data from the cumulative relative frequency table. Again, x-axis labels are not good. So I want to go into it again. So I right click on it. I go to select data. Again, remember left y-axis, right x-axis. So I want to change the x-axis labels. I click on edit. And I show Excel what my labels are. My labels are here. I'm dragging my mouse over this whole range and clicking OK. And clicking OK again. And something went wrong. Well, oh no, was just a little lazy. So everything falls into place. Here are my labels for the cumulative classes. And here are the percentages. Again, this increasing of the data is reflected by the increasing of the graph from left to right. So if you move from left to right, the y values get higher and higher, approaching 100%. Okay, thanks for watching. In the next video, we will see how to calculate the mean of group data.